Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michaela Peck from the Office of Distance Learning. Um, Thanks for attending today's session on standards for online quiz creation. Thanks as well to Mrs. Kamla Anderson for joining today's session. She's also from the Office of Distance Learning. Okay, so in the month of March, we actually conducted two sessions similar to what we'll be looking at today. We did quiz creation from scratch. We looked at setting up the quiz shell, importing questions to the quiz. We had also looked at how to use different quiz formats for quiz creation and for importing, the questions to Moodle. All right. You'll hear me using Moodle and UTech Online from time to time interchangeably. They're the same thing. All right. As part of that training as well, we had looked at creation of question banks. We looked at creation of quiz categories and the importance of same. And then the following week, we looked at quizzes from the perspective of troubleshooting. So I had a long list of FAQs from lecturers who had had issues in the past setting up the quiz, and their students as well would have had issues attempting the quiz, finding the quiz. So from that session, it was more of a technical session. We addressed those issues. In today's session, we will be looking at, we'll be exploring the best practices for online quiz creation. And this is just really to ensure that your students have the best experience while taking a quiz online. And, just to make sure it is a smooth sailing process involving no glitches. Of course, we understand technology. We understand that the online environment, comes with its technical issues and certain things we can't avoid, right? But we can limit certain things happening in the online space, like cheating, for example. So we want to explore some of the standards to mitigate that. There's something else I wanted to mention. Okay, so throughout the session, if it is that you have any questions, you can raise your hands and I will take a break, come back to the screen and ask you to speak and take the mic. If you prefer using the chat, you can open that section. The ribbon can be found bottom right of your screen. It's a purple ribbon. Once you click on it, it pops out. The first icon is a chat bubble. So you can click on that and enter your message. If it is that you are part of today's session and you did not attend any of the sessions in March, you can leave your email address in the chat to receive recordings for those two sessions as well as for today's session. Okay. All right, so I'm going to be sharing the PowerPoint. I know you're seeing the front screen. That's actually an image. And of course, this session will also have demos. So I will be in and out of the PowerPoint presentation to demonstrate my screen with the NewTech Online. Okay. Just got a notification that my connection is poor. If you're able to still hear me and see my screen at current, could you just say yes in the chat for me? Okay. All right. So I'm also gonna ask everybody to mute. All right, everybody is muted. So when you want to speak, you can raise your hand or indicate in the chat. All right, so this is a PowerPoint presentation that was put together for today's session. I won't be doing full screen because, as mentioned before, I'll be referring back to UTech Online from time to time for demonstration purposes. Now, the first best practice or useful tip comes from semantics and the sentence structure. So the first point I have here is to try to avoid using negatives in your questions and answers. So for example, we could have a question like, which of the following items is not a result of evaporation? So the not there is the negative word being used, and such questions can be confusing for students. So what we recommend is a careful use of this approach. If it is that you want to use the word not, do it carefully, in a way where you can keep your students on their toes. So if you do use it, consider writing the negative particle of the sentence, which would be not, in capital letters, probably bolded text, italicized text, or underlined text, so that your student does not miss it, right? If not, you can restructure the question in a way where it will not confuse the students. The next point is to refrain from the use of imprecise descriptors, which are words like approximately, at least, any, and the list goes on. So for example, what is the approximate value of the constant pi? When you ask inaccurate questions, it increases the likelihood of you receiving an inaccurate answer, right? So well-written questions will hopefully help to elicit well-written answers from your students. So for example, a good way to turn this question around is by saying, express the constant pi to the nearest 3 significant figures. Okay, now our third point is to eliminate the use of the option all of the above. So this is whenever you are shuffling the answers within the quiz question. So just remember, you can shuffle questions as well as shuffle the answers within the quiz questions. Whenever the answers for the questions are shuffled, you will definitely not know the order within which they might appear to your students. And all of the above might occur as answer A. And clearly no answer option would appear before A. So what we recommend, instead of all of the above, you use the words all of these. All right. Now our fourth point under semantics and sentence structure, it's very important to ensure that there are no grammatical errors or misspellings in your questions, as this can easily throw off students and it may cause the questions given to connotate a whole new meaning than what you originally intended. So ensure that you do a thorough check just to ensure that grammar is on point, there are no misspellings, and ensure that the question actually gives the meaning you intend for it to give. Okay. All right, so let's move on to our third tip from the category of question banks. So if you were at the last sessions in March, we looked at the importance of creating categories for questions, right? But the long and short of it is that when you have question categories created, it basically allows you to easily organize and find the questions when you need them. And we're going to be demonstrating that as well. All right. The next point is to shuffle the question order within the quiz, and also to shuffle the answers within questions. I earlier mentioned that you can shuffle the question order and you can shuffle the answers. These are two different things which we will look at shortly. And of course, we're doing this to mitigate cheating, because if students get a different order of questions, this would help to limit them being able to match answers for the same questions. All right. Our fourth point here says that if the quiz is randomized, you should create a category for each question type. So randomization and shuffling are normally confused, but they're not the same. With the randomization within UTech Online, it allows you the feature of pulling questions from a massive question bank. So you might have created a question bank with 300 questions or 100 questions. You can ask the system to pull 10 questions randomly for your students. You won't know which 10 questions the system will pull because it's an automated process, right? So it is saying if the quiz is randomized, you should create a category for each question type. And finally, create multiple sections and shuffle questions within each section. So I'm not sure how many of us know, but when you are setting up your quiz, final exam, whatever it is, within UTech Online, you have the option of placing them in sections, and you can still shuffle within each section. All right, my throat is a little bit sore, so just apologies if you hear me, catching my breath with my throat. Just having an issue with my throat today. All right, so let us begin with the demonstration. We're going to be quickly looking at creating categories for questions. All right, so for those who weren't in the last session, this is good for you paying attention. So I'm on my course page and I'm going to be creating a category. Can anybody point me to where I would click on to begin this process? I know I have many bright sparks in today's session. Does anybody know what the first step is?
Turn editing on.
All right, so for this process, we actually do not need to turn editing on because we're not looking at creating a quiz shell. We're just looking at creating the categories before we import the questions. All right, somebody else said turn editing on. Anybody else wants to try? You can take the mic if you want to try. Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, so what we're going to be using, the gear icon. Sorry, top right of the course is actually the actions menu. So if I click on that, at the bottom, we have the more option. And this takes us to course admin. Right, so the second to last option under course admin shows us question bank. Okay, under question bank, we have questions, categories, import, export. What we want to do is to create a category. And it's simple. To create the category, you simply click on categories, scroll down. You want to select a parent category. So this basically means that it will be stored within this category or under this category. So what I normally recommend is top for the name of the course. So this is going to be top for Moodle demonstration course. All right. And I'm going to give my category a name. So I could probably call this MCQs for test 1. All right, I would scroll down. Category info and ID number are not required fields. We scroll down and click on category. All right, and that is simply how you create a category. And let me just zoom in from the screen here. You can see the category, right? And in brackets, you're seeing 0 because there are no questions contained in this category just yet. All right, so that is how you create the category. So you go to the actions menu top right, click on more, go to course admin, scroll down, and you will see the category options. All right. Okay, all right, Mrs. Anderson is handling that for me. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. How to shuffle the question order within quiz. We want to look at that. It's very important because there are 2 options that we actually have to enable to ensure this. There are 2 options. One of them lies in the edit settings option for the quiz, and the other is when you're actually editing the quiz to add questions to it. So we're not going to go through the long process of creating a quiz as that was done prior. And remember to leave your email addresses to receive the recordings for those. But we're going to be looking at a quiz that exists. So I'm going to edit the settings for a quiz in the MDC course. Gonna scroll down. All right. And we are looking for, I think it's layout, not layout, question behavior. Yes. Okay. So below layout under question behavior, there is the option that says shuffle within questions. Okay, and if I click on the help icon here, it says if it is enabled, the parts that are making up the questions will be randomly shuffled each time a student attempts the quiz, provided that this option is also enabled in the question settings. Okay. So this has to be enabled. So shuffle within questions, yes. We scroll down, we click on save, all right, and then we would also go to the edit quiz feature of the course to also ensure that that is ticked for shuffling. So I'm going to click on the quiz. Oh, oops, that's an assignment, not a quiz. Right, I'm going to click on the quiz. We're going to be looking at the actions menu. The option at the top says edit quiz. Okay, we're not seeing. Oh, this is an assignment. This is not a quiz. Right, that's an assignment. My bad. I think I'm a little bit far up in the course. Okay, right. So let's do that again. Gonna click on test quiz. All right, and the edit quiz option can be accessed from the actions menu. It's the fourth option from top. Okay, and this quiz has 7 questions, but the shuffle option is not enabled. All right, and I'm currently unable to enable it because the quiz is already closed. It was taken possibly, but you can see the note here that it is closed. However, while you're setting up your quiz, always remember to come here and to tick the shuffle option. Otherwise, the quiz will not be shuffled. Okay, now the third point within the question banks tip, it says shuffle answers within questions. So that's a whole different thing. So clearly that would be applicable to a question like a multiple choice, for example. So we have some multiple choice questions here. I'm just going to click on the first one. And if I scroll down, it shows me, do I want to shuffle the choices? All right, so this is shuffling the options for this question. If disabled, they won't be shuffled. They would flow in the order that you enter them here. If not, you will not know the order of answers the students receive for this particular question. Okay, alrighty. The next point, it says, if the quiz is randomized, create a category for each question type. And that was earlier demonstrated where I created a category and I called it MCQ. So in the instance where you're building a question bank for randomization, right? And you want to have each of the categories with the same question type, you can rename one as I did earlier to call that MCQ for test 1. The other one could be true and false for test 1. The other one could be essay type questions for quiz 1. Right? So that is basically the process that you would use for creating the category. And what helps is how you rename the categories for your easy identification. Our next point says create multiple sections and shuffle questions within each section. Okay, so just follow from my screen, right? I'm gonna go back to where we have all the questions laid out. That's here. And we're not going to be able to use this for demonstration purposes because the quiz was already taken and it's closed, so we're not seeing most of the options. So let's look at another quiz. Let us look at another quiz. Okay, so this one says it's a test quiz. Let's use this one instead. Go to edit quiz. All right, and currently, good, what we're seeing is that this quiz has 3 sections, section A, section B, and section C. So what I'm going to do, I am going to delete the sections just to show you how you'd go about in them. And I'm also going to be removing the questions so you can see how you can pull from the question bank using randomization. All right, so I'm just going to select all the items and delete all of them. Good, so the quiz is empty. Okay, now what we're going to do, we are going to firstly give the quiz a section name. So we want to have 3 sections. All right, so we're going to call the first section section A. And to do that, you would have seen that there's a pencil to the left of my screen. If I click on it, it allows me to enter the section name. So section A, and to save this, you hit the enter key on your keyboard. All right, and we're going to be using the randomization feature to add some questions to this section. So under add, we're going to click on a random question, third option. Good. And in this category, we have 15 questions. Okay, I'm going to search for the test category, which has 348 dummy multiple choice questions. What if I wanted to pull 20 of these questions for, let's say, section A? What I would do is to ensure that the category is selected, right? And I get to choose here the number of random questions I want the system to pull. So I would click on the drop down, select 20, scroll all the way down. Remember that we don't get to select the 20. It's a automated process by the system. Scroll all the way down and click add random question. Okay, and here we can see that 20 random questions were brought over. Okay, now let's say we want to add section B, sorry, but we want this to be different questions. We would click on add, click on from question bank. All right, and if you want to add more random questions from another category, you can do that as well. It doesn't matter which category you're taking them from, as long as the categories exist with the questions. All right, so I'm going to be using Moodle test quiz. It has 9 questions. I'm going to select 5 of the 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to click add selected questions to the quiz. And my questions have appeared. Now, you would realize that by default, the system has placed the questions on a page each. You're realizing that. That is because the quiz was set up for that layout. All right, so I'm going to be demonstrating that shortly, but just to let you know, the system did that because it was told to put a question on a new page, each question on a new page. Okay, now section B starts at page 21. We know this because we had 20 questions randomly pulled initially. Now, if I want to create a break between question 20 and 21, so that questions 21 to 25 it is, are in section B. On the page 20, to the right, I will click on add, and the option at the bottom says a new section heading. That is how we add the section heading between section A and section B. So I'm going to click on that, scroll down, and now I can enter my heading by clicking on the pencil and by typing section B. All right, so enter to save, and we can see section A questions different from section B questions. Let's add one more section. Just going to show you something. If I click on the add button here, there's no option for me to add a section heading. That is simply because we're at the end of the quiz, right? And there are no questions that are below this section. However, if I had clicked here, that is before the last question, I would get the option. All right, so you won't see it appearing at the end of any section. So let's pull some other questions now. Okay, let's actually create this question. So the first option on the ad says a new question. I'm going to create an essay type question. Double click on that. All right, and you'd realize it's showing you the category will be automatically placed. And if you don't want this essay type question in that category, you simply select the category you want it to appear in. All right, so I'm going to call this question 26, and the question text is going to be all right, and the essay type question, as we know, is an open-ended question. You can scroll down. We can enter the default, we can enter the marks rather for this question. scroll down, and we would save. Before we save, I want to let you know that with our new Moodle upgrade, essay type questions can now carry maximum and minimum word limits. So if you tell your students in no more than 400 words, give their opinion on this question, you can actually enter what you want the word limit to be, minimum and maximum. All right. So to do that, you would have to enable the option, because I'm clicking and there's a stop bar. You have to click to enable minimum 500. You only want to input minimum, you can, or you can do both if you want to. All right, so this is a very important option. This option can also be seen in the assignment plugin. The assignment activity also allows for you to enter the word limit. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down, click on Save Changes. See, my question is here. Why is Jamaica referred to as an island? And I'm going to put this in section C. So to do that, I have to click on the add above section, above question 26, new section heading, and we're going to call this section C. Good. Okay, now how do we shuffle these questions? We want them to be shuffled, but we don't want the questions to be mixed up from each section. Can this be done? Yes, it can. You would realize to the right of each section, there's a shuffle button. So if I tick the shuffle button, section A will be shuffled. Let's look at section B. There's an option to the right. If I tick on it or click on it, section B would be shuffled. Section C. Section C still has the option, but clearly it's just one question, so there's no need to shuffle. All right, so that is how you create questions, or create rather a quiz, pulling them from different question banks using randomization. That is how you actually create and assign the sections, and how you can shuffle within each section. All right, so I'm gonna pause a little bit. Do we have any questions before I move on? Is it clear? Is everything clear to you thus far?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Hi, Ms. Beck. Good afternoon, Mr.
Mrs. Rose is very low.
Um, are you hearing me any better now?
A little bit better.
Right. I was just saying to you that it's not clear to me, but I came on in late. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore I will probably, may I have the recording and the other documentation when you're finished, so that I can go through again to be able to do it. Because I came in on late, so it's really not clear to me. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, I guess will still proceed, and then afterwards, if I get the information, the recording and stuff, then I'll be able to go through and see whether or
All
not it is
right.
clear.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
ask you to leave your email address in the chat so it can be sent to you after.
Sure, will do. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Do we have any other questions, any concerns, any statements before we continue? Everybody's following? Okay. All right. I know that silence means I can continue, so I'm going to continue. Okay. So we just looked at question banks. We're going to now move on to number of questions per page. Okay. So we at the Office of Distance Learning, and I think it's a general advisory, we advise one question on each page, maximum two. And this recommendation does not have to do with how many items can fit on the page, but rather it has to do with limiting openings for students to cheat. Right? So it's always good when we can create opportunities for students to not cheat, right? And with this particular selection, students have less opportunities to collaborate with each other on answers, right? Because when we're doing this, remember that we have in mind the fact that we're shuffling the question. So students A question 1 could be students B question 10. Okay, and the other reason, separate and apart from eliminating the risk of cheating, it causes the quiz page, to appear less intimidating to the students, which could in fact affect how they perform, because they can feel overwhelmed just looking at all the questions at once. So when you present them, right, in a manner where they're only seeing a few questions or one question per page, I think it could positively impact their performance. All right, let me check this chat. Okay. All right, so let's move on to quiz security. Okay. Now, the first point I have here, restrict access. This feature, it can be used to determine who you want to access your quiz, whether it's a particular group, a particular grouping, a student using their first and last name, and there are actually more criteria that you can set up. Let us look at this before I move on to the others. How can you restrict access to your quiz? Basically, how can you determine who takes the quiz and who does not? So let's use our same test quiz that we have. We're going to edit the settings for the quiz. Okay, and we're going to scroll down to restrict access, and this is actually a common setting that you will see for most activities and resources in UTech Online. So if I click on this, it gives me a box to add restriction, and I can restrict based on activity completion, date and time, grade, group, user profile, and restriction set. Now, if I want a student from a particular group or students within a particular group only to access the quiz, I would click on group, and it says students must match the following. They should be in the group called Group A. So what this means is that students who are Group B, in Group B, C, D, they'll be able to see the quiz, but they will not be able to access it or to take it. Okay, and then you can also add restrictions based on the student's first and last name. To do that, you click on add restriction, click on user profile, all right, and you can choose the field. So we want to choose first name, we're going to add another restriction, user profile, and we're going to choose surname. So it says students must match all of the following. So first name should be equal to, you enter the first name, last name should be equal to, you enter the last name. Mrs. Anderson, could you remind me that the student's name has to be in all caps, is it so?
Yes, Miss Peck.
Right.
And can I just add one other thing based on something that we're
Sure.
seeing? We're having requests now for persons to add students with regards to deferred assessment. When that happens, they're not going to be added in an occurrence. So what you can do if you're restricting the access to occurrences, you'll have to restrict that. You'll have to do the groups and then the students separately. So in other words,
Okay.
if you've added if 5 students have requested deferred assessment and they have been manually added by ODL, then you will need to add those 5 students separately in addition to the
Group
occurrence. Yeah.
occurrences. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Mrs. Anderson. Okay. So let's say my student is John Brown. And why Mrs. Anderson mentioned we have to use uppercase. If you don't, the system will not recognize the user, the student. All right. So John is the student's first name. Brown is the student's last name. And you have other conditions here. It could be that the first name doesn't contain, starts with J, ends with J, is empty, not empty. But I want it to be where it's equal to John and surname is equal to Brown. So this basically means that only John Brown will be able to take this quiz. You can add multiple students' names if you want. You're not restricted to one. All right. So I'm going to scroll down, click on save and return. Good. And it tells us Not available unless your first name is John and your last name is Brown. Okay. Our next point here speaks to password security. So you may also instead choose to password protect your quiz if you only want a certain number of students or a particular set of students taking it. So we're gonna go back to the edit settings feature, and there's a section that says extra restrictions on attempts. When I click on that, it gives me the option to enter a password. So even you as the lecturer, you would need a password to preview the quiz. Okay, so I'm gonna enter the password. So let's call this, I'm gonna click on the I to unmask it, Moodle demo. All right, and of course it is case sensitive and space sensitive. So if there's a space between Moodle and demo, you need to let your students know that. All right, so I'm gonna scroll down, click on save and return to course. I'm going to try to attempt the quiz by clicking on it. Click on preview quiz now, and you see even as a teacher and as a manager on the UTech Online site, it prompts me to enter the password. But remember, if you don't remember the password, you can always go back to the setting I just demonstrated, click the I to unmask, and you'll be able to see the password. So once you have entered the password, student has clicked on start attempt, they'll be able to attempt the quiz. And this is actually what it looks like. Remember, I created the questions with the different sections. This is section A, section B, and section C. So the quiz navigation block to the right actually shows the sections there. Okay, now JavaScript security. So I'm not sure how many of us are aware, but there is this function in Moodle in the same quiz settings that allows you to enable browser security by activating what we call JavaScript. And what this does is that it will only allow the quiz to start if JavaScript is enabled on your students' browsers. So when this feature is enabled, the quiz will appear in a full screen pop-up window that covers all the other windows that students are using. And within this screen, there are no navigation controls, right? So students are prevented as far as is possible from using facilities like copy and pasting. The students cannot copy using the mouse either. They cannot select any part of the text. The right mouse click is disabled. The browser menu is disabled, and they can't use the shortcut keys like Control X, Control C, and I think it's Control V to paste. So the keystrokes are disabled. So where is this option? We're gonna go back into Moodle, go back to the quiz. All right, we're going to edit. And I think it's under extra restrictions on attempts, show more. Right, so browser security. If you select full screen pop-up with Java security, then you would be able to limit the students, as I just mentioned. And of course, this helps greatly and contributes greatly to decreasing the risk of cheating. Okay. And then we have the option of proctoring. Academic institutions all over the world are using different specialized software tools for proctoring. We have others who are using the regular tools like Skype, Zoom, or Blackboard Collaborate to monitor their students in real time as they take their exam online. Now, this can be a tedious process, watching your students as they take the quiz, and it can be tedious simply because it might be a large group, right? It's probably like 5 to 10 students. It might be easier for you to proctor them. This is an option that exists for quiz security, so I have decided to mention it to you. Let me quickly check the chat. Will that browser security be detrimental for different types of browsers or browser settings? Right, so that is a good question. And in answering that question, I'd segue into saying that the browsers that we recommend for the use of Moodle, UTech Online, is Google Chrome. So there are Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. If you're using a Macintosh device, we advise use of Safari. Those browsers, I can speak for them. They would allow for you to enable JavaScript, and you should have no issues. Students should have no issues rather enabling JavaScript. So there's a section in my presentation that gives step-by-step instructions on how to enable JavaScript, which you will see shortly. The PowerPoint I'm presenting from will also be shared to you once your email address is left in the chat. Okay. Important settings to verify when you are setting up your quiz or exam online. Date and time of the quiz. And we're going to look at them, each of them as I mentioned them. Date and time of the quiz. Okay. Timing allows for you to open the quiz at a particular date and time, close the quiz at a particular date and time. The options are not activated if you don't enable the box beside each. So if I enable, I can set this quiz for today at 1 o'clock, right? And UTech Online uses the 24-hour clock, so this is 1300 hours. Good. And I can choose to close the quiz same day, let's say at 1400 hours, that's 2 o'clock. Okay. All right, so that is how you set the open and the close date and time for the quiz. Now the next point here says duration of quiz. So since the students will be doing their exam online, we want to, or quiz online, exam or quiz, we want to in every way limit the possibilities of cheating. So with the duration of quiz feature, the intention here is to decrease the amount of time given that could contribute to them trying to cheat, right? So if you prefer to give an extended period or more time than you normally would, then the recommendation is to ask more open-ended or essay type questions, right? Or ask questions that give you a glimpse into their thought process rather than an answer that can be easily researched or looked up. All right, so that is a recommendation when you're choosing what the duration of your quiz will be. And of course, that is entered right below the time for open and closing. It says time limit. You have to enable that as well. If you want it to be 2 hours, you enter 2 and click on hours. You want it to be 1 hour. All right. Okay. Our next options, we look at number of attempts, quiz layout, location of quiz within the course, navigation method, and review options. Okay, I think I just heard a hand being raised. Mrs. Hutton Rose.
Hi, Miss Beck. Okay, I see you have there the option for the time duration, like 1 hour, 2 hours. Do you have for like 1 hour 45 minutes, 2 hour 45 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes or so? Where would you put that?
Right. So I know for 1.5 hours, you can put 1.5. Never try to put what were the other ones you mentioned?
1 hour 45 minutes.
Oh, I've never tried that before, so I really can't tell you if it can be done. Mrs.
Miss
Anderson.
Peck, yes, you can just use a minute.
Okay.
So you just
Yes,
use it. So like,
Okay. Yes,
right.
that's a good idea.
Because I've used it
Yes.
before and it works.
Yes. So you'd use the minute. So whatever 1.5
Okay.
or quarter to is
Oh, one
equivalent
on
to in
three,
minutes, you can put it.
okay, 1 hour 45 minutes. Okay. So that would be 105 minutes then. Okay.
Right.
Also use the minutes. Convert it to minutes and then put it there. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. Okay. So the quiz layout, let's just scroll down. We had looked at this earlier, so this is actually where you get to enter how many questions are placed on each page. All right, so every question on a new page is the reason why we had one question occurring on each page. So that is it for the quiz layout. In terms of the navigation method, the navigation method, as the name suggests, has to do with how students navigate throughout the quiz. Free navigation means that they can jump from question to question in no particular order. Sequential restricts the students. It's like a locked method of navigation, which allows the students to take the quiz in a logical manner. So once they have taken question 1, they can only move on to question 2, then to question 3, and so on and so forth. They won't be able to jump because the navigation method is being locked. All right, and that also helps to mitigate cheating as well. The next point says review options. All right, and we're still in the edit settings menu of the quiz. So with review options, you get to determine when students get to see your feedback on the quiz. All right, and there are several options here. Immediately after the attempt, later while the quiz is still closed, after the quiz is closed. What we recommend is after the quiz is closed, if this is an exam or a quiz with heavy weighting. So I'm going to disable all of these. Okay, and enable after the quiz is closed. I want them to review the attempt. And you have to be careful what you actually enable here, right? Because suppose you don't want them to see what the right answer is, but you want them to see that their answer was incorrect. So we can choose the attempt, their answer was correct, you want them to see the marks that they got, and possibly general feedback for the quiz and overall feedback. Okay, you might be wondering, when do we use the other options? So if you're giving your students a practice quiz or practice quiz in preparation for the real thing, you would actually use the other options. However, if you look above review options, we have question behavior. All right, so the feedback is deferred, which means that they would get it after the quiz. If I selected immediate feedback, this would basically mean that the students would receive, whether their answers are correct or incorrect, whatever result after, and probably even while taking the quiz, if we actually have these enabled, because during the attempt allows for students to be able to see their progress as they take each question. Finally, location of the quiz within the course. All right, with that option, it's very important to note that, and this is something that has happened many times. So for example, a lecturer will write me and say that, the student was unable to take the quiz, if I can go in and take a look at the quiz. And when I go to the lecturer's course, I'm seeing a lot of quizzes. I don't know which quiz they're referring to. Okay, so visibility, is very important. So if it is that you have created a quiz and you put it under unit 2, you have to let your students know that it's under unit 2. If it's under week 1, you have to let them know. All right, and same thing when you have an issue and you're sending that request to the ODL, you have to let us know what the location of the quiz is. Okay, because if you have multiple quizzes, we could looking at the wrong one. Okay, so that is very important when setting up your quiz. Now we are going to quickly review, and these were done in depth in our last sessions. We're going to quickly review the formats for GIFT and Akin. What are these for? These are formats that the UTech online system accepts for quiz question creation. So if it is that you have questions that you want to bulk import, you can use any of these formats. It saves you a lot of time, it saves a lot of energy, and it limits your frustration, because as you know, the quiz creation process can be tedious, can be long, and it can be confusing. Right? So the GIFT format supports most question types, and this is what the format looks like with the true and false questions. Let me zoom up so you can get a better view. With the true or false question, you would enter the question and put the letter for the correct answer within curly brackets. All right, so you can disregard this. If you enter this, it will appear as question 1, not necessarily necessary, right? Or we're focusing on the structure of the format. So this is how you do the true or false question. You have the question and you have the letter that indicates if it's correct or incorrect in curly brackets. The next question that we have here is multiple choice. All right, it says multiple choice with specific feedback for right and wrong answers. I think it's clearer to you if I actually break this down the way in which I would normally do it. All right, so we have, and let me just remove the space between the lines so it's clearer for you. Okay, so the question is here and the punctuation follows. Remember that we put a curly bracket before we start listing the options. Okay, so this is one option, this is another option, this is another option, and the question ends. So for the correct option, remember that you put an equal sign before the correct option. All right, so why you are seeing this number symbol is because it is showing feedback for the answer that the student selects. So if the student selects yellow, they'll get the feedback right, good. All right, if they select red or blue, they would get the feedback wrong, it's yellow. So this limits you uploading 300 questions and having to go back now into Moodle for the 300 questions to enter specific feedback if it's important for you, right? And if it is a case where you don't want to provide feedback to your students, you can remove everything that occurs after the number symbol. So that is what it would look like. All right, and then we have the fill in the blanks. As I said, it supports multiple question types. We have the fill in the blank option where you put the question and you put all possible correct answers within curly brackets preceded by equal signs. Okay, so what this question is basically telling me is that the word 2 is accepted and the number 2 as well is accepted. Okay, so all possible answers, if there were 4 possible answers, you could enter them within curly brackets. All right, so I'll be attaching this document as well, along with the PowerPoint and the recording when I'm sending off later this evening. Okay, and then we have the Akin format. Let's scroll down for that. The Akin format. So I'm not sure if you know, but Akin only supports multiple choice questions. Okay, and you are seeing me demonstrating this in a Word document. This has to be done in a notepad document, and it has to be saved as a TXT file, text file. All right, so this is what the multiple choice looks like in the Akin format. So you have the question name, you list the options with a space between after you have entered the letter. All right, and then you list what the answer is, space after the colon with the letter. Okay, and there should be a single space between each question. Regardless of the format, you use a single space between each question. Okay. All right. So I said before, this PowerPoint will be sent to you. However, I've still included here how you can enable JavaScript within your browser. It's a simple process. You're using the settings option within security and privacy, and what it will allow you to do is to select the sites that you want to use JavaScript. All right, so this is various basic instructions that you can give to your students. You can also test it for yourself to see that it works. And once it's applied to your browser or to the student's browser, then they should have no issues with the quiz. If it is not applied and you have enabled this option, the students will not be able to start the quiz. All right, so we have come to the end of today's session. Are there any questions before we go? I had mentioned earlier, if you missed sessions in March that looked at quiz creation and troubleshooting, you can leave your email address in the chat and I'll send that to you. Today's recording will also be included and the different documents that supported today's training session. Okay, do we have any questions before we go? Any comments? Anything you're not clear on? Okay, all right. If we have no questions, we want to tell you thanks for attending today's session. All right, and all right, you are most welcome, everyone. Thanks, Miss Balachandar. The next session we will have, and this was promised in our last section, the next session we'll have will look at the interactive H5P elements, which basically allows us to have a lot of engagement within the online space through the creation of simulations, games, and interactive learning activities, and for content presentation as well. We want to explore that because I believe it will boost students' online experience while learning. All right, and I believe that these are fun tools that you will look forward to using, and it will heighten your interest as it relates to using Moodle. Okay, so thanks everyone again. Thanks for attending. Details about the next session I just mentioned will be sent via the UTEP broadcaster, but more than likely it would be for next week, same day, same time, 12 p.m. on Wednesday. All right, thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.